Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The air in the Combined Operations Command Center was heavy, too heavy for this hour of the morning. A cocktail of burnt coffee, recycled oxygen, and the metallic hum of machines filled the subterranean room. Screens glowed against the concrete walls, their light slicing across uniforms and faces worn thin by sleepless nights. This was General's domain, his cathedral of control, and in that world every sound, every motion was his to command. But then she walked in. Her shoes made no sound on the polished floor. Gray slacks, dark blue polo shirt, and a leather satchel, civilian attire, quiet, deliberate. Didn't belong here, not in this sacred war room of stars and steel. She carried no weapon, no rank. Only a laptop and the kind of calm that unsettles soldiers more than fear. Saw her the moment she entered. He didn't like what he saw. A civilian, a woman. From the Office of Net Assessment, his aide whispered. A think tank where analysts played with theories while soldiers bled. The general's jaw hardened, every line of his face carved by wars fought on 3 continents. 40 years of command had turned him into a monument, immovable, unyielding. Get her logged, give her a seat somewhere, away, he ordered. So they did. They placed her behind the analysts next to the backup conduits, an afterthought, a polite insult wrapped in protocol. She didn't react. She simply opened her laptop and began typing. She didn't even glance at the big screens or the men moving like machinery around her. Her attention was surgical, absolute. And that was the first thing noticed, her stillness. In a room where chaos was currency, she was motionless. No chatter, no nervous fidgeting, just focus. He hated that. His people noticed her too. Operators glanced over their shoulders, some smirking, others whispering. "What's she doing here?" one drone pilot muttered. "Probably assessing our caffeine consumption." The laughter was quiet, but not quiet enough. Didn't stop it, he let it flow. It was part of the ecosystem, the hierarchy of respect and mockery that kept his command intact. She would learn her place, he told himself. Everyone did, eventually. He turned to the main table, the holographic map that painted their battlefield in ghostly blues and reds. The mountain range glowed beneath the projection, a jagged scar across desert terrain. Red icons pulsed like open wounds. Blue markers moved steadily toward them. Viper Team, his elite unit, 12 soldiers, ghosts in their own right. "Status on Viper," said. "On approach, sir," answered Lieutenant Colonel, his voice sharp and practiced. 20 minutes to target Alpha, all systems green." Grunted, "Clean feeds." "Yes, sir," drone eyes are clear, no enemy movement. "Clean," repeated, his voice low. "Clean is what worries me." He looked toward the corner again, where sat, expression unreadable, her screen angled away. She didn't seem to hear him, or care. She was focused on something else entirely. He'd already called the Pentagon once that morning. "Get her out of my AO," he'd told a 3-star. "I don't need a political appointee second-guessing my operators." But the answer had come back curt and infuriating. "She stays, direct assignment from above, handle it." He didn't ask who above was, he already knew. By 400 hours the room was alive. The hum of servers mixed with the low murmur of orders, the tapping of keyboards, the steady pulse of war. Stood at the map table, posture perfect, voice steady. "Target Alpha compound confirmed. HVT Scythe. Entry window 30 minutes. Enemy quick reaction force positioned 5 miles east here. Barracks compound. Air support on standby for suppression. Contingencies in place." His voice filled the room. This was his world where clarity was control. "Questions?" he asked. Silence. Then a voice, soft, even. "General, the pattern of insurgent transmissions doesn't support the QRF being stationed there." His head turned. The entire room followed his gaze. It was her, standing near the edge of the briefing circle, holding a data pad, calm as if discussing weather. There's been a spike in low-power encrypted bursts originating from the Western Plateau, she continued, consistent with a mobile command node. They're active, too active for a dormant sector. I think the Eastern barracks are a decoy. Her tone wasn't defiant. It was factual, like she was describing a math equation. But too, it felt like a slap. He took a step toward her, each footfall sharp, deliberate. The room held its breath. "Miss," he said, voice low and dangerous, "we deal in confirmed facts, not statistical theories. Our intelligence is A1 triple-sourced. What you're seeing is noise, background chatter, goat herders with sat phones." A few chuckles rippled through the staff. She didn't even blink. "With respect, General," she said evenly, "the encryption is military grade. They're using the same transmission cycle as your Reaper drone pings. They know you're watching." His face hardened. "Your observation is noted," he said, turning his back on her, "and irrelevant. We proceed as planned." The briefing dissolved. Officers dispersed, whispering. She made an impression unwanted but unforgettable. Later, he called her into his office. He didn't offer a chair. "Let's make something clear," he said, voice low. "You're here as a courtesy. You do not speak during my briefings. You do not question my intelligence. And you certainly don't challenge me in front of my officers. You understand?" Her eyes met his, calm and steady. "I was tasked with identifying anomalies that might endanger the mission. That's all I did, sir." "Your duty," he snapped, stepping closer, "is to stay out of my way." He could see it in her. No fear, no arrogance, just quiet certainty. That calm again, that unsettling, immovable calm. "Understood, General," she said softly. He almost wanted her to flinch, to fight back, to react. But she didn't. "Get out," he barked. She left. Her footsteps were silent again. He turned back to the screens, furious. And yet, under it all, something colder stirred. A whisper of doubt he refused to name. Because she hadn't been wrong before. Not exactly. When the first sign of trouble came, it was subtle. "Static. Viper 1, this is Archangel. Report status," the comms officer called out. No response. "Viper 1, do you copy?" Still nothing. Then Sir Reaper feeds down. Frowned, rebooted. "We can't, sir. Signal's jammed." The map flickered. Red icons blurred into snow. A dozen voices erupted at once. "We've lost all drone telemetry. Satcom's unresponsive. We're blind, General." Blind. That word cut through him like a blade. "Get it back," he shouted, but even his voice couldn't steady the chaos now erupting around him. Operators scrambled. Alarms wailed. The humming cathedral of order became a hive of panic. "Enemy movement," someone shouted. "Massive spike from the east." The very spot he'd marked as the QRF. "Light them up," roared. "Air support, strike that compound." "Sir," the coordinator shouted back, pale-faced, "we can't confirm Viper's position. If they fell back east, we could hit our own men." The words hung in the air. He froze. For the first time in his career, General didn't know what to do. The room spun with noise, screens, shouts, alarms. But inside him there was only silence. He saw it now, the trap, the arrogance, the precision with which the enemy had baited him. They hadn't just jammed his systems. They'd turned his certainty against him. And then a quieter voice cut through it all. His fingers were already flying across her keyboard. No panic. No hesitation. She wasn't looking at the broken feeds. She was diving deeper, bypassing corrupted networks, pulling raw data from sources the military hadn't even thought to check. Civilian power grid, geological sensor, substation logs. She was listening to the Earth itself. Her eyes narrowed. A pulse, tiny, rhythmic, deliberate, appeared on her screen. Not natural, not random. It was a power signature. Military-grade capacitors cycling energy through buried hardware. They were jamming from underground. She kept digging. Another pattern surfaced, a faint tremor captured by an old seismic sensor the military had forgotten existed. And then another, a moving signal from a highway transmitting a looping data feed. A decoy. Her chest tightened. She understood now. The QRF wasn't in the east. The ambush was west. Viper was walking into it right now. She rose from her chair, every step measured, and crossed the room toward the holographic table. General. Turned, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. What is it? Come to tell me I told you so. They're not in the canyon, she said quietly. They're on the western plateau, inside the old Soviet mine tunnels. The power draw, the seismic hum, the false broadcast, they all converge there. If you don't act in 8 minutes, you'll lose them. The room froze. Every operator turned. Even the screen seemed to hold still. Stared at her, disbelief written across his face. Based on what? He demanded. Based on the data, she said simply. You've been looking at ghosts. He almost ordered her out again. Almost. And then, a sound split the room. A phone, not just any phone, the secure line. No one spoke. A tech answered, face draining of color. Sir, it's for you, the White House. His hand went cold. He took the receiver. This is General. A voice calm, measured, unmistakable. Said the President of the United States. I'm told you have a situation with Viper team. I'm also told you have on site. Swallowed, yes, Mr. President. Good, the voice said. Then listen carefully. You are to follow her instructions, all of them, without question. She has my full authority and yours, understood. There was a long silence. Looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. Her eyes were steady, not proud, not smug, just knowing. Understood, he said. The line clicked. And in that quiet, suffocating moment, the myth whispered through the room. Oracle. He couldn't hear the hum of the servers anymore. Not really. Everything felt muffled, as if the air itself had thickened after that phone call. Oracle. He had heard the name once years ago in a classified briefing where the walls seemed to lean in and the air felt colder. A myth, someone had said. An algorithm, maybe. A committee. No one had ever said she. Now she stood in front of him, calm, human, frighteningly real. For a long moment, no one moved. The entire command floor was suspended in that strange gravity between disbelief and awe. Then exhaled, a sound that was half sigh, half surrender. All stations, he said quietly, voice hoarse. You heard the President. Oracle has command authority. You will follow her lead. It felt like swallowing glass, but he said it, and the room obeyed. Didn't gloat, she didn't even look at him. She turned toward the holographic map, her expression unreadable, voice level. Clear the board, she said. Erase all false icons, all corrupted telemetry. Start from zero. The room erupted into motion again, but different this time. The chaos had purpose now, direction. Red markers blinked out one by one until the map was an empty canvas, a pale blue desert stretching in digital silence. Next, she said, redirect the Rivet joint aircraft from eastern orbit to grid Foxtrot 7. Focus on this narrowband frequency. She tapped coordinates, uploading her own sequence into the data stream. You'll find enemy chatter there. It won't sound like ours. Filter for handshake bursts every 12 seconds, that's their comm relay. Operators obeyed, their fingers flying. Watched her move, precise, composed, almost eerily calm. There was no uncertainty in her tone. Every instruction came like a rhythm she had rehearsed 1,000 times. Gunships, she continued, turning slightly toward the air support console. Your window opens in 7 minutes. The jamming array vents nitrogen every 19. During that vent cycle, it overheats and resets. You'll have exactly 174 seconds of clean airspace. Make them count. The coordinator blinked. Ma'am, how do you? I cross-referenced the capacitor's signature with thermal bleed from a weather satellite. she said without looking at him. "You're welcome." There was no arrogance in her voice, only fact. Stood beside her now, silent, watching the map reform under her direction. For the first time in his life, he didn't have orders to give, only orders to understand. He had spent 4 decades mastering the art of war, and now, standing beside this quiet woman with a laptop, he realized he was decades behind the real battlefield. It wasn't fought with bullets anymore. It was fought with data, with patterns, with the invisible hum beneath the noise. "Oracle," he said softly, "you're sure about the plateau?" She nodded. "I don't guess, General, the data doesn't lie." Then, almost as an afterthought, "People do." The words hit him harder than he expected. Across the room, the rivet joint operator raised his hand. "We have signal lock, frequency found." "Put it on audio," said. A burst of static filled the air, then voices, foreign, rapid, triumphant. Laughter. A dialect recognized instantly. He had heard that same guttural cadence in interrogation recordings, in briefings about ambushes. One phrase repeated, clear as a knife: "The wolves are in the pen." The room went cold. "That's them," whispered. "They've got Viper boxed in." His eyes narrowed. "Patch me the translation stream." On another screen, lines of text began scrolling. "Send second squad to finish. Americans blind. Sky silent." She turned to, "That's confirmation. They're on the plateau. Vipers being funneled underground." Her voice didn't rise. She didn't shout. Yet every syllable carried a quiet weight that silenced the room. Looked at her, jaw tight. "Then we get them out." "Yes," she said, "if we move now." She tapped commands into her laptop. "I'm transmitting coordinates and timing to your comms desk. When the array vents, the window opens. The birds strike here, here, and here." 3 glowing points flared on the holographic terrain, each precisely placed along the ridge above the mine. Leaned closer. "That close to the plateau, that's danger close for friendlies." "They won't be there," replied. "They'll be under the ridge, trust the timing." Hesitated. Every instinct screamed against it. But the president's voice echoed in his head, "Follow her recommendations without question." He nodded once, "Do it." "Copy," the air support coordinator said. "Gunships en route. ETA 3 minutes." The clock started ticking. Around them, the room transformed. Operators leaned in. The noise softened to a tense hum. Every man and woman on that floor knew they were part of something unreal, following the lead of a civilian who saw through chaos like it was glass. His eyes drifted to her profile, calm, focused, unshaken. She wasn't performing. She wasn't proving anything. She was just doing what needed to be done. "Rivet joint reports enemy frequency spike," an analyst called out. "They're coordinating ground pursuit, chasing our team westward." "Good," murmured. "Let them chase." The map updated. Blue markers blinked back into existence, faint, fragmented signals from Viper's beacons. "We have them," the comms officer said, voice trembling. "It's weak, but—" "Broadcast one burst message," interrupted. "Low band, encrypted Shepard frequency channel." The officer frowned. "Shepard frequency. They use it for livestock trackers. It's unmonitored. Use this packet." She handed him a code on her tablet. "It'll ping them the extraction point." "Copy." The seconds stretched. The countdown hit 30. "Gunships are on station," the coordinator announced. Didn't look up. Her eyes were fixed on a timer on her screen. "Vent cycle begins in 25 seconds." Swallowed hard. "You ever been in a fight like this?" She shook her head slightly. "I don't fight them, General. I listen to them." 15 seconds, said. His hands were clenched so tightly the knuckles whitened. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Wait for it." 10. The room seemed to stop breathing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Now." The comms officer's console flared to life. "We have link. Viper lead responding, comms clear. The roar of gunship cannons filled the speakers seconds later. On the main display, infrared feeds lit up, white silhouettes of enemy fighters swarming the mine entrance. Then came the eruption, 30 rounds tearing the ground apart in precise, rhythmic bursts. The desert floor became molten light. "Direct hits," the coordinator shouted. "Targets neutralized." Felt the air leave his lungs. He didn't cheer, he couldn't, he just watched. "Viper is moving," another voice called. "They've broken contact heading for extraction corridor." "Keep the birds low," instructed. "Follow this vector 73 degrees south. There's still anti-air at the ridge." "How do you know that?" someone asked. "Because they just stopped transmitting on their command net," she said. "They're listening. They know we're listening. That's fear. Fear always moves the guns first." Her words weren't tactical, they were human, and they chilled him more than any battlefield report ever had. Minutes passed. The sounds of combat faded. The feed shifted again, grainy footage of black silhouettes boarding helicopters in a haze of sand and smoke. "All birds are away," the comms officer said finally, voice cracking. "All personnel accounted for." Silence. Then spontaneous applause, soft at first, then louder. Operators turned in their seats, exchanging looks of disbelief and relief. Leaned back, rubbing his face, laughing breathlessly. Didn't move, he just looked at her. Was already closing her laptop, her movements slow, methodical. No triumph, no smile, just quiet completion. "You saved them," he said softly. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "The data did." He almost smiled, almost. "You mean you did?" For the first time, a faint trace of emotion flickered behind her calm eyes. Something like exhaustion and something deeper. Sadness, maybe. "They were never supposed to be in danger," she murmured. "Not if anyone had listened sooner." He had no answer for that, none that didn't taste bitter. The command floor buzzed with celebration behind them, but for the two of them it was quiet, a silence heavy with truth. He had tried to throw her out, and she had just saved everything. Hours later, the adrenaline had burned away. Reports were being filed, operators replaced by the next shift. The big screens now showed weather updates and routine drone patrols. The storm had passed. Sat back at her corner station, wiping her laptop screen with a microfiber cloth, slow and deliberate. She packed her satchel, methodical as a surgeon closing an incision. Approached, 2 ceramic mugs in his hands. He didn't know why he'd brought them. Habit, maybe, or humility looking for a shape. He set one down beside her keyboard. Black, no sugar. She blinked once, surprised. "You noticed?" "I notice a lot," he said, "just not soon enough." They stood there, 2 silhouettes in the soft glow of monitors, the smell of coffee cutting through the metallic air. "Sunrise in an hour," he said quietly. "They say the desert looks different then." She took the mug, wrapped her hands around it. "It does." Neither spoke for a long moment. The silence wasn't awkward, it was human. When she finally turned back to her laptop, he lingered a second longer. "Oracle," he said, the name still foreign on his tongue. "If you ever need a soldier who listens." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time her voice softened. "Then keep listening, General. That's all any of us ever need." He nodded, wordless. He walked back to the raised dais, his throne of screens, his empire of control, but it didn't feel like his anymore. Sat quietly, sipping her coffee, watching the horizon on the small armored window as the first light of dawn crept over the desert. In that faint gold, the room no longer looked like a bunker. It looked like a beginning. She opened a new encrypted file. Lines of code cascaded down the screen, fresh anomalies, new threats, the hum of the next storm already whispering in the data. The world didn't rest, neither did she. And somewhere behind her, a battle-hardened general sat in silence, finally learning what command really meant. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the silence feel heavier than the battle? The desert was still. Even the wind outside the command bunker seemed to hesitate, unsure if it was allowed to move again. The morning light bled slowly through the narrow observation slit, turning the concrete walls pale gold. Inside, the hum of servers returned to its steady rhythm, the heartbeat of a machine that had nearly flatlined. General sat at his desk, reading the after-action report. His signature was required on every page, but his eyes didn't really see the words. They only replayed one image, 12 blue icons flickering back to life on the map, one by one. 12 lives pulled out of hell because of a woman he had almost thrown out. He closed the folder, the paper edges trembling slightly in his hands. He hated that tremor. It meant the armor was cracking. Outside his glass office, the command floor looked ordinary again. Routine traffic, routine noise. But the atmosphere had changed. Operators spoke quieter now. Their laughter came softer, respectful, as if the room itself had earned scars. And somewhere behind those controlled voices was the same whisper that had been moving through the corridor since dawn. Oracle. A legend that had worn no uniform. Aide stepped into the office, posture stiff, eyes uncertain. "Sir, the President's liaison is on the line. They want your preliminary debrief within the hour." Nodded, "Tell them they'll have it." Hesitated, "Sir, about Miss." "What about her?" "She's packing. Looks like she's leaving within the next 30 minutes." Leaned back in his chair. Of course she was. She'd always been just passing through, a ghost in transit. But the thought left a strange emptiness in his chest, a silence that wasn't relief. "Let her," he said finally. Nodded and turned to leave but paused. "Sir, for what it's worth, she saved those men, every single one." Didn't respond. He just stared past the glass at the distant figure in the corner of the room. Her posture straight, calm, precise even as she unplugged cables and folded them with the neatness of ritual. The staff gave her a wide berth. Respectful, awed, maybe afraid. He rose, his boots echoing against the polished floor. She looked up when he stopped beside her workstation. "General." "Miss," he corrected himself before she could. "Oracle." Her gaze flickered just once at the name. "I prefer." "Fair enough." He folded his arms, "Leaving so soon?" She gave a small nod. "I was only assigned to this operation. The next tasking comes through in an hour. There's always another fire to put out." He studied her for a long moment. "You make it sound like a routine." "It is," she said simply, "for me." There was no pride in her tone, no fatigue either, just fact, the same even rhythm she'd used in the middle of chaos. Exhaled, "You ever wonder what it costs?" She looked at him. "What does?" "Being right," he said, "knowing what no one else sees." Her expression softened barely, every day. He wanted to ask her 100 things then, how she did it, what it felt like to carry that kind of weight, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the knowledge that she wouldn't answer in the way he expected. Oracle didn't talk about herself. She read the world, not her own reflection. "Did you ever serve?" he asked finally. "No," she hesitated, then added quietly, "but I've buried people I worked with. That's close enough." The line landed somewhere deep in him, deeper than he wanted to admit. He nodded slowly, then extended a hand. "You have my respect and my apology." She didn't shake it right away. Instead, she looked at it as if measuring sincerity in the stillness. Then she took it, her grip firm and cool. "Respect accepted," she said. "Apology unnecessary. Just listen next time." He almost smiled. "That's the hardest order you've ever given me." "Then it's the one that matters." She let go. He watched as she slung the satchel over her shoulder, her steps soft, precise. The door sealed behind her with a hiss. For the first time in years, the command center felt too big, too quiet. 2 days later, Washington. The debrief room was a different kind of battlefield, bright, sterile, windowless, sat under fluorescent light while three men in suits leafed through classified transcripts. He hated these rooms. The air smelled like bureaucracy. "So," the senior analyst said, tapping the report, "you're confirming that civilian consultant directly altered your operational orders during an active mission." His jaw flexed. She corrected a fatal intelligence error. If she hadn't intervened, Viper team would be dead. The man looked up, unimpressed. "That's not what we're asking, General. We're asking whether she overrode your command authority." His eyes lifted icy. "She didn't override anything. I gave the order, my men followed, and they survived." A silence stretched. The second analyst, narrow face, gray tie, leaned forward. "You understand the implications, sir. A civilian directing combat operations." "She's not a civilian," cut in. The man blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard me," leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You can label her however you want. Think tank, analyst, asset, doesn't matter. She's part of us. She saved more lives with a keyboard than most of us have with entire divisions." The room went quiet. The first analyst flipped a page slowly. "Her file is sealed above our clearance," he admitted. "We don't even know who signed her in." "Then maybe stop asking the wrong questions," said. He signed the report, pushed it back across the table, and stood. "If you need someone to blame, you know where to find me." Outside, the corridor smelled faintly of polish and distance. Every sound was muffled, as if even the Pentagon held its breath when her name was mentioned. Oracle. That night sat alone in his quarters. The city lights bled through the blinds, tracing harsh white lines across the metals on his desk. He stared at them for a long time, the small rectangles of metal that had once meant everything. Now they just looked like punctuation marks at the end of a long, unfinished sentence. He remembered her voice, "Listen next time." The words wouldn't leave him. They echoed every time he thought about command, about leadership, about the weight he carried. He'd always believed leadership meant certainty. That doubt was weakness. Now he wasn't so sure. He opened the mission report again, scanning the pages until he reached her section, Consultant, ONA, Contribution, Intelligence Anomaly Identification, Signal Analysis, Yield Counter Strategy. No mention of Oracle. No acknowledgement of what had really happened. Just quiet erasure. He stared at the blacked-out lines, the redacted paragraphs, the invisible truth. It made him angry, and then it didn't. Because maybe that was the point. Maybe people like her were never meant to be known. Maybe saving lives wasn't about medals or promotions. Maybe it was about the quiet, the unseen, the unrecorded. He poured himself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, and for the first time in a long time he smiled at the bitterness. Somewhere else, thousands of miles away, sat alone in a darkened observation room. Screens glowed in front of her, satellite imagery, live telemetry feeds, encrypted streams of raw data flowing across half the planet. A new crisis was forming, different terrain, same chaos. Her voice was low as she dictated notes into an audio log. Possible escalation in northern quadrant. Pattern consistent with pre-strike communication. Recommend preemptive electronic lockdown within 48 hours. She paused. The cursor blinked in the corner of the screen, waiting. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, calm, composed, tired. Not weary in the body, but in the soul. For a moment her fingers stopped moving. She thought of the 12 men from Viper team. She had never met them, didn't even know their faces. But she'd heard one of their voices, faint through the static just before the extraction. "Whoever you are, thank you." She replayed that message once. Then she deleted it. She didn't need gratitude. She needed silence, the kind that followed a mission completed, the kind that meant she could breathe again before the next one started. Her comm terminal pinged. A new file opened automatically. Classification, eyes only, A. She frowned slightly. A message embedded within, just 3 words. "Thank you, Oracle." She stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the file, lips tightening in something almost like a smile. Outside the facility, dawn was beginning again. Another desert, another horizon painted in slow gold. She sipped her coffee, black, no sugar, and whispered to no one, "You're welcome, General." Then she turned back to the data. The hum of the machines rose around her, soft, constant, alive. The war never really ended. It just changed languages. But for that was enough. She didn't need recognition. She didn't need to be remembered. She only needed to know that somewhere out there, someone was listening now. Because that was how peace began. Not with a command, not with a victory, but with the quiet choice to listen. Why was her name on his desk again? The envelope had arrived before dawn, plain, unmarked, yet carrying the weight of authority. Inside, a single sheet. No insignia, no header, just 4 words. Reactivation request, A. General had been in his office for hours, coffee gone cold, eyes scanning the note again and again. He'd spent 2 weeks trying not to think about her, telling himself that their mission together had been a storm that passed. But here she was again, in ink, in silence, in the place between duty and something he couldn't define. He set the paper down and looked out the narrow window slit of the new operations hub. Different base, same walls. Different air, same recycled hum of servers. He thought he'd left this kind of tension behind. He thought she had too. But the note said otherwise. "Sir," his aide's voice pulled him back, stepped in, tablet in hand. "New SIGINT came in from the Baltic zone. It's odd." Frowned, define odd. Hesitated. "It's ghost data, sir. Something spoofing NATO satellites. False weather telemetry, radar shadows, very subtle, almost elegant." His heartbeat slowed. He knew that word, ghost. He remembered the chaos, the blackout, the trap that had almost killed 12 men. He leaned back, voice quiet. "Who identified it?" Hesitated again, then handed over the tablet. "Office of Net Assessment. Misflagged the anomaly last night." Of course. Didn't even realize he was smiling until noticed. "Sir." "Get me a line to her," said. "Now." 3 time zones away in a windowless basement layered with screens was already awake. She didn't sleep much anymore. Not because of nightmares. She'd seen too many of those secondhand. But because her mind refused to stop seeing patterns. Even when her eyes closed, data flickered behind her eyelids. Numbers, codes, frequencies, whispers. The new anomaly had caught her attention 3 nights ago, a faint, repeating signal buried inside European updates. No one else would have seen it. It looked like background static. But to her it pulsed wrong. Too consistent. Too intentional. She was tracing it through the Atlantic relay when her secure line blinked red. Incoming call. Military encryption level alpha. She hesitated before answering. There was only one man who would use that channel directly. "General," she said softly. He replied, his voice roughened by distance and sleeplessness. "We've got another ghost." "I know," she said. He almost laughed, a low, disbelieving sound. "Of course you do." For a moment neither spoke. The static between them hummed like shared memory. "I read your report," he said finally. "Satellite shadow anomalies, layered transmissions. You think it's hostile." "I don't think," she said, eyes scanning the cascading code on her screen. "I know, and this time it's not local, it's systemic. Someone's learning from us, General." He went still, learning. They're mimicking the data architecture from the Nightfall incident, using false environmental signals to mask something larger. Movement, most likely. Maybe deployment. Rubbed his temples, staring at the map on his wall. Europe. The fault lines of another potential firestorm. We don't have confirmation. "You won't," she said. "Not until they're already there." Silence stretched again. Then quietly, "So what do you need?" Her tone softened. "Access. Full command bandwidth. I can't confirm the source without it." "That'll raise flags in every department," he said. Then raise them, she replied, or watch it happen again. He smiled faintly at her audacity, the same calm defiance, the same voice that once dismantled his arrogance in front of an entire command staff. "You still talk like you outrank me," he said. She didn't hesitate, "only when I'm right." He laughed, this time openly. "I'll get you what you need." He meant it. 2 days later, she arrived at the forward command hub, a concrete bunker beneath the Baltic frost. When she stepped through the airlock, the air was colder than she remembered. Not just the temperature, but the atmosphere itself. Suspicion had weight. Uniformed officers turned as she entered. She could feel their eyes on her. The whispers, the disbelief, the ghost stories still circulating from. "That's her. Oracle. The one who saved Viper." Was waiting by the central display. He looked older somehow, not weaker but carved deeper, less granite, more human. He said, "General." He gestured her forward. "This one's different." The map before them pulsed with green and blue overlays, hundreds of satellite trajectories. Studied it in silence for a long time, then touched the edge of the holographic table. "There," she said softly, "those repeating frequency gaps. You see them?" Squinted. "Looks like noise." "It's not," she said. "It's a mask. Someone's rewriting the atmosphere." The room went still. Frowned. "Explain." "They're manipulating cloud density readings to hide radar shadows, likely to conceal air traffic, but not military grade." He raised a brow. "Then what?" She hesitated. "Cargo. Civilian signatures spoofed as weather balloons, which means someone's moving something across restricted airspace and no one's noticing." "Any idea who?" "Not yet," she said, "but it's coordinated, and whoever they are, they're good. Better than last time." Her words lingered. "Better than last time." Crossed his arms. "Then we find them before they get better than you." She almost smiled. "Almost. That's the idea." Hours stretched into days. The command hub became a hive again. Screens, murmurs, cold coffee. Barely left her workstation. She mapped transmissions through civilian weather grids, intercepted shipping manifests, traced energy fluctuations across northern Europe. Patterns emerged slowly, like ghosts revealing their faces in fog. At 300, found her still there, hunched over the blue light of her laptop. "You haven't slept," he said. "Neither have you," she replied without looking up. He approached, studying the lines of code scrolling across her screen. "You really see it all in there?" "Not all," she said quietly, "just enough." "Enough for what?" She hesitated, fingers pausing. "Enough to know we're already late." He leaned closer. "Show me." She tapped a key and the holographic display shifted. A map of Europe shimmered, dotted with faint green arcs, each one a data trail she'd stitched together from unrelated sources. Power grid irregularities, shipping schedules, false atmospheric reports. "It's all one network," she said. "Someone, building a corridor, digital cover for physical movement. They're transferring high-density material through neutral airspace, and they're doing it under our radar. Literally." Stomach sank. "Weapons." "Or worse," she said. Stepped forward, pale. "How the hell do we stop that?" His eyes were dark, focused. "We don't stop it, we expose it." She turned too. "I need authority to trigger a false weather alert over the Baltic corridor. If I can sync our atmospheric sensors to their false readings, I can make them reveal themselves." "That's a massive interference order," said. "Civilian aviation, commercial routes, it'll cause panic." She didn't flinch. Better panic than ignorance. Looked at her, weighing the risk, the noise, the possible fallout. 2 weeks ago he might have hesitated, but not now. "Do it," he said. Blinked. "Sir." "Do it," repeated, his voice like steel drawn from the furnace. "If she says it's the move, it's the move." Nodded once, then set to work. Within minutes, The false weather alert propagated across every civilian satellite in the region. Flight controllers scrambled, radar systems rebooted, the Baltic corridor lit up with cascading data errors. But in the chaos, something else happened, something beautiful and terrifying. Invisible signatures flared on the map. Dozens of red dots, each one a camouflaged aerial craft, previously hidden in the false telemetry. There whispered, there they are. The room erupted with motion, officers shouting coordinates, analysts cross-referencing logs. Swore softly, that's not cargo, those are. Autonomous transports finished. Unmanned carriers, they're deploying them like seeds, dispersal drones, chemical or biological payloads maybe. His breath caught, Jesus. Not yet, she said. We've got one chance to intercept. They're moving along civilian flight paths. You can't shoot them all down without triggering panic. Then what do we do? Her eyes met his, calm again. We change the signal, make them think the mission failed, redirect their autopilots home. He stared at her. Can you do that? Her fingers were already moving. I can try. The room dimmed. Only the glow of her screens lit their faces, stood beside her, watching as she manipulated streams of encrypted data like threads of fate. The digital storm built around them, error messages, alarms, red warnings, each one a sign of systems rebelling against what she was doing. Then suddenly silence. The red dots flickered. One by one they turned and began retreating, like a tide pulling back into the dark. The entire room exhaled as one. Voice broke the quiet. They're turning away, they're leaving. Closed her laptop slowly, her expression unreadable, for now. Looked at her, awe and something deeper in his eyes. You just stopped a war, didn't you? She didn't answer. Her gaze lingered on the fatting red trails, the digital ghosts vanishing into the void. Maybe, she said softly, or maybe I just delayed one. He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The hum of the servers filled the silence again. And somewhere between that hum and the faint dawn outside, General realized something he'd never thought he would. That the most powerful weapon he'd ever commanded didn't carry a gun. Why did saving lives always come with punishment? The Baltic air outside was sharp, metallic, biting through the heavy wool of his uniform. He stood on the rooftop of the bunker, watching the dull gray sunrise creep over the ice fields. The world looked deceptively calm, the kind of morning that could almost fool you into thinking nothing had happened. But down below, in rooms without windows, history was twisting itself into knots. Reports were being rewritten, narratives restructured, truth diluted. And in the center of it all, sat behind a locked glass door, awaiting disciplinary review. His jaw tightened. The cold didn't bother him, but the silence did. The silence of men who knew what was right but preferred to hide behind policy. He'd seen that kind of cowardice before, just never wearing suits. Appeared behind him. Sir, they're ready for you. Nodded. He didn't move right away. What are they calling it? Unauthorized signal interference, said. Technically a cyber attack on civilian infrastructure. He laughed bitterly. She saved a continent from a bioweapon release, and they're calling it interference. Sir hesitated. You might want to temper your remarks. The oversight panel isn't happy. Neither am I, said, and then quieter, but one of us still has a soul. He started walking. The sound of his boots echoed like a warning. The tribunal chamber was nothing like a courtroom. It was colder, quieter, the kind of place where guilt was presumed before anyone spoke. 3 officials sat behind a long desk, their expressions carved from bureaucracy. To their right sat, composed as ever, hands folded on the table. She wasn't restrained. She didn't need to be. Her calmness alone unnerved them more than handcuffs ever could. Took his seat beside her, ignoring the murmurs that followed. General, the lead official began, you are here as a witness, not an advocate. Then I'll witness the truth, said flatly. The official's eyes narrowed. Miss, you are accused of initiating an unsanctioned data manipulation that resulted in the temporary failure of regional air control systems across multiple NATO member states. Your actions disrupted civilian aviation and caused panic among local command units. Didn't flinch, yes. You admit to it. I do, she said. I also admit that without those actions, 37 unmanned carriers would have completed a chemical dispersal across populated zones. Casualty projection, 8 million. The man adjusted his glasses, irritated by her composure. That is speculation. No, she said quietly, that's mathematics. He leaned back. Miss, regardless of your calculations, you operated outside of any command authority. She operated under my command, cut in. The man turned sharply. General. She advised an immediate countermeasure. I approved it. If you want to punish someone, start with me. A ripple moved through the panel. The lead official's lips thinned. General, this is not about your pride. It's about accountability, interrupted. So let's be accountable. She was right. Again. You can tear apart her methods all you want, but you can't argue with results. 8 million people woke up breathing clean air because she saw what none of us could. Enough, the word cracked like a whip. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken rules. The official turned back to, you are a civilian analyst, miss, not an officer. You have no operational command rights. The president's authorization from the previous incident does not extend to foreign theaters without formal renewal. Do you understand? Yes, she said softly. Do you have any statement in your defense? Looked down at her folded hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. I don't defend what I did, I just stand by it. The panel conferred in murmurs. Phrases like protocol breach and precedent risk drifted through the air. When they finally dismissed her, followed her out before anyone could stop him. She walked down the corridor like she was leaving a place she'd never wanted to enter. Her steps made no sound on the polished floor. You shouldn't have spoken, she said quietly. Neither should they, replied. But I'm done watching good people get punished for doing what's right. They won't listen to that, she said. Then they'll listen to me, he said, and there was iron in his tone that hadn't been there before. She stopped, turned, met his eyes. Why? He frowned slightly. Because I owe you. No, she said, shaking her head, you don't. She started to walk again, but he caught up easily. You just prevented a mass casualty attack, and they're trying to turn it into a paperwork scandal. Her voice was almost a whisper. That's how systems survive, General. They consume their heroes before the truth can. He stopped walking. You really believe that? I've seen it, she said. Over and over, they don't want people like me. They want certainty, not vision. He looked at her for a long time, the weight of his years pressing on his shoulders. Then maybe it's time someone changed what they want. Her expression softened. You can't fight the whole machine. He gave a faint smile. Watch me. The next morning he made the call, not to the oversight panel, not to the brass, straight to the top. Mr. President, said when the encrypted channel opened, if I might speak freely. You always do, the president replied. I'm requesting reinstatement of full operational clearance for, said, immediate effect. There was a pause, a rustle of papers, a sigh. You know the kind of pressure I'm under after what she pulled. I also know what kind of pressure you'd be under if she hadn't, countered. Dead? She saved millions, he said, cutting in. She saw through the noise when no one else could. If we silence that kind of mind now, what does that say about us? Another pause, then, you trust her that much? With my command, said simply, and my life. The silence stretched. Then the president said, you'll have what you need by morning, but you tell her this comes with scrutiny. No more ghosts in the dark. I'll tell her, said. When the line went dead, He realized he hadn't taken a single breath the entire time. He found her later that afternoon in the mess hall. She was alone, a cup of coffee cooling beside her, a laptop half closed. "They reinstated you," he said. She didn't look surprised. Of course they did. The alternative would be admitting failure. "You're welcome," he said. She glanced up. "For what?" "For fighting the machine," he said. Her lips curved, the faintest ghost of a smile. "You're learning." He sat across from her, studying her face. There was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not fear, something heavier. "You're not planning to stay long, are you?" he asked. "No," she said. "They'll move me again, they always do." He nodded slowly. "And if I told you I'm not done working with you?" She tilted her head slightly. "Then I'd tell you that's not your decision to make." "Maybe not," he said, "but it's one I'll fight for." She looked at him for a moment, then leaned back. "You're changing, General." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I'm finally seeing." That night sat alone again in the operations center. Everyone else had gone, the lights dimmed to a soft blue hum. She stared at the screens, endless data streams, live feeds, the pulse of a digital world that never slept. But tonight something felt different. The patterns were still there, whispering to her like they always did, yet beneath the noise she heard something else. A kind of quiet trust. It wasn't just data anymore. It was connection. Someone somewhere had listened. She opened a secure file, the one had sent after the tribunal. It wasn't a report or an apology, just a single sentence. "If command means silence, then I'll follow the ones who speak truth instead." Her hand lingered over the words. Then she smiled, faint and fleeting. Outside, snow began to fall, soft against the concrete walls. For the first time in years, didn't feel like a ghost. And somewhere in the darkened corridors of power, a general who once measured victories in bodies and battles now measured them in something far rarer: understanding. Because in a world obsessed with command, he had finally learned the strength of obedience. Not to authority, but to truth. Sometimes the hardest orders are the ones that teach you to listen. Why did the lights flicker only when she was alone? At first told herself it was nothing, a faulty ballast, a miswired transformer somewhere deep in the base's infrastructure. But as the nights passed, it kept happening. Always at 200. Always when the corridor outside was empty. Always when she was running a trace on the Baltic dataset. She sat still in the cold blue glow of her monitors, eyes fixed on the steady rhythm of code spilling across the screen. The hum of the servers filled the air, low and constant, like a pulse beneath her skin. She told herself not to feel it, that fear was irrelevant. But beneath the composure, beneath the control, something human stirred. They were watching. Not the enemy this time, not foreign actors or rogue states. It was closer, inside the system. A line of code scrolled by, something that shouldn't have been there. A signature buried deep, masked beneath standard encryption. A surveillance tag, not military grade, intelligence grade, domestic. She leaned back slowly, heart beginning to pound. Someone had planted a watcher inside her network. "Not possible," she murmured, but the moment she said it, she knew it was. Someone in her own chain of command was tracking her. She didn't move for a long time. She just sat there, staring at the tiny blinking cursor, a single heartbeat of light in a room too quiet. Then, without warning, she reached forward, disconnected her system from the main grid and rerouted it through a private offline node. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were calm. But inside, the storm had already begun. General didn't sleep much anymore. Not since her. He'd spent most of his career believing war was fought with weapons. Now he knew it was fought with silence, with information, denial, and the deliberate killing of truth. When entered his office that morning, was already reviewing the satellite logs had sent from the Baltic. His eyes were red, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, the coffee beside him untouched. "Sir, we've got a situation," said quietly. Didn't look up, define situation. "It's—" That made him look up. "What about her?" Hesitated. Security division flagged her terminal, unauthorized access to restricted networks. His voice hardened. "She's been cleared for top-level bandwidth." "This wasn't operational," said. "They're saying she's gone dark, disconnected her system, pulled herself off the—" For a moment just stared at him. "Why?" "They don't know. They're demanding authorization to detain and question her." He stood slowly, like hell. Swallowed. "Sir, it's coming from higher than us." His eyes narrowed. "How high?" Didn't answer. He didn't have to. Straightened, every inch of the old soldier returning. "Tell security division to stand down." "They won't listen, sir." "Then they'll listen to my boots," he said, already moving. He found her in the server room, a cathedral of humming machines and low blue light. She was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, laptop open on her knees, surrounded by cables like veins in some digital organism. She didn't look up when he entered. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," he said. Her voice was calm, but the edges were sharper than usual. "They're watching me." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." She looked up then, eyes catching his. For the first time since he'd met her, there was something in them he hadn't seen before, not fear exactly. Disappointment. "I told you this would happen," she said quietly. "They never let people like me work without a leash." "You're not their prisoner," he said. She gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Then why are they pulling the chain?" Glanced at the screens. "What did you find?" Her fingers flew across the keyboard, summoning a stream of code. An internal trace. Someone's embedding surveillance packets into the NATO relay logs, hidden under the pretense of system integrity scans. "It's not coming from outside. It's coming from us." His blood went cold. "You're saying—" "Someone inside the Joint Command is monitoring me. My work, my searches, every signal I've flagged since the incident." He stepped closer. "To what end?" She closed the laptop. "You tell me." The hum of the servers filled the silence between them. Finally said, "They're afraid of you." Her eyes narrowed. "They should be." He almost smiled, but the weight in his chest was too heavy. "If they're tracking you—" "They're tracking you too," she interrupted. "You defended me. You went over their heads. You made yourself a liability." He leaned against the wall, exhaling. "Story of my life." She stared at him, then said quietly, "You could walk away, you know, pretend you didn't know any of this. They'd let you." "I could," he said, "but I won't." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then finally she said, "Then we're both ghosts now." By the next morning, the rumors had spread like smoke through the command structure. Oracle compromised, internal breach, unstable asset, the language of bureaucratic fear. The same system she had protected was already rewriting her into the enemy. Stood in the observation gallery above the main command floor, watching the officers below. The faces were the same, efficient, focused, professional, but he could feel the change. The quiet shift in posture, the subtle withdrawal of trust. They were afraid to even speak her name. Joined him at the railing. "They've frozen her clearance, sir. Orders came from Oversight Intelligence Group." "On what grounds?" "They're calling it a containment measure. Risk of compromise." "Containment," said, the word tasting like poison. "She's not a disease." Hesitated. "They're saying she might have gone too far, that maybe her methods cross ethical lines." Turned, his glare sharp. "You were there in the Baltic. Did she cross a line, or did she save our entire species from choking on its own arrogance?" Looked away. "I'm not disagreeing, sir, but this is politics now." "Then politics just declared war on the truth," said. That evening, he found her sitting alone in the old hangar that had been converted into storage. No lights, just moonlight spilling through broken panels in the roof. She was sitting on a crate, her satchel beside her, her posture relaxed, but her eyes told a different story. "They'll come for me," she said before he even spoke. "I won't let them," he said. "You can't stop an order you can't see." "I can damn well try." Her gaze softened. "Why, General, why risk everything for me?" He hesitated. "Because you remind me what we're supposed to be fighting for." "What's that?" "The truth." She smiled faintly. "You really think they care about truth?" He shook his head. "No, but I do, and I'm still wearing the uniform." A long silence stretched. The air smelled faintly of dust and cold metal. "You know what the real problem is," she said finally, using his first name for the first time. "The truth doesn't belong to anyone. It's just there, and the people in charge are terrified of anything they can't own." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we stopped asking for permission." She looked at him, really looked, as if seeing something in him that she'd never allowed herself to before. Something human, something dangerous. "Do you trust me?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Then I need you to do exactly what I say." He smiled faintly. "That sounds familiar." She didn't smile back. "This time it won't be easy." An hour later, they were in the communications vault, deep beneath the facility. The hum of the secure servers was louder here, the temperature lower. Hands moved quickly across the interface, bypassing layers of security that should have been impenetrable. "What are you doing?" asked. "Pulling the thread," she said, "the one tied around both our necks." Data filled the screen. Log entries, access credentials, internal memos, and then, suddenly, a name. His expression hardened. "They've been routing your surveillance through Intelligence Group Delta." She nodded. "And look at the authorization code." He did, and the realization hit him like a blow. That's presidential level. "Not signed by the president," she said. "By someone pretending to be." He felt the air leave his lungs. "You're saying this entire surveillance program is rogue," she finished, "operating under a forged chain of command." Stared at her. "How deep?" "Deep enough that if we bring this up the wrong way, we disappear." The hum of the servers filled the silence again. He could hear his own pulse pounding. "What do you want to do?" he asked. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Expose it, quietly, carefully, before they erase us." He nodded once. "Then let's begin." Later that night she sat alone again, staring at the data they had. Every file was a risk. Every byte of information was a death sentence if found. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. There was no going back now. Somewhere above ground, the wind howled across the frozen Baltic coast. And in the dark of the bunker, the woman they called Oracle whispered to herself the one truth she knew would outlive them all. You can silence people, but not patterns. Because patterns always came back. And so did the ones who dared to see them. Why was the night so quiet? The Baltic wind usually roared over the base at this hour, a steady scream through the antenna masts and concrete alleys. But tonight the silence was heavy, too still, too deliberate. Felt it before she saw it, the way silence turns into a sound of its own. A warning. She didn't move, she just closed her eyes and listened. Then she whispered, "They're here." Across from her in the dark of the communications vault, General looked up from the screen. "How do you know?" "Because it's quiet," she said softly, "the kind of quiet they make before they move." A beat passed, then a muffled noise, a door far down the corridor, the faint hiss of hydraulics. He drew his sidearm. "Too late," she said. "They've sealed the exits." His pulse steadied. Decades of combat had taught him to read fear, to use it like a blade instead of a wound. But this wasn't war in the traditional sense, no uniforms, no battle lines. Just shadows and silence and orders written in invisible ink. He looked at her. How much did you get? Enough, she said. Enough to prove what they've been doing. Enough to burn half the network if it goes public. Then we can't let them have it. She nodded once. That's why I'm not running. He frowned. I need to finish transmitting. Her eyes never left the screen. Every second we talk, they get closer. I'm rerouting the files through dead satellites, old weather channels. They'll think it's debris data. He glanced toward the vault door. You have 2 minutes tops. Then buy me 2 minutes, she said. And he did. By the time the first tactical team reached the lower corridor, was already there. He moved with the quiet precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime fighting ghosts. The first soldier through the door didn't even see him, just the blur of motion and the metallic crack of a rifle butt against his visor. Grabbed the second man, twisted, and shoved him into the wall. The hallway filled with muffled noise, the sharp thud of impact, the brief hiss of breath leaving lungs. He didn't kill them. He didn't need to. He just needed time. Behind the reinforced wall, worked in silence. Her fingers moved like lightning across the keyboard. The screens flickered maps, code, voice logs, authorization forgeries, all pouring through the makeshift network she'd built out of spare transmitters and military scrap. Come on, she whispered, hold together. Outside, another muffled shout, a flash, a concussion charge. The door behind her trembled. She hit the final key. Transmission complete. Then she pulled the drive, crushed it under her boot, and exhaled. When stumbled back inside, bruised and breathless, she was already standing. It's done, she said. He looked at her, at the quiet triumph in her eyes, at the faint tremor in her hands. Where? Sent through low-orbit broadcast. They'll never trace it back. The truth's out there now. He nodded slowly. Relief washed through him, sharp, almost painful. And then the intercom crackled. General Miss, stand down. The voice was calm, authoritative. It wasn't a soldier's voice. It was bureaucratic, measured, the kind that kills quietly. Stand down immediately, it repeated. You are both under arrest for violation of national security protocol. Didn't even flinch. They know, she said softly. Raised his weapon toward the intercom. Then they can come get us. They didn't have to wait long. A rolled through the doorway, blinding white and thunderous. Shoved behind a console, covering her with his body as the air filled with ringing silence and acrid smoke. By the time the haze cleared, 10 armed operators had flooded the vault, weapons raised. On the ground, someone shouted. Dropped his sidearm, slow and deliberate. His hands rose, his eyes never left. Do as they say, he murmured. But she didn't move. Miss, the voice barked again. Now. She stood calm, composed, unarmed, and looked straight at the man leading the team. You're too late, she said. The commander frowned. What? The files, she said quietly. They're gone. And the look on her face, the quiet certainty, told him she wasn't bluffing. They separated them immediately. Was dragged into an armored transport, wrists bound in front of him. He didn't resist. He just watched as another convoy carried her away, smaller, sealed, unmarked. He tried to memorize the plate, but the snow swallowed it. Inside the transport, the silence pressed against him like a wall. Was there, seated across from him, face pale. Sir, I tried too. His voice was hoarse. Where are they taking her? Hesitated. Secure facility, off-grid. That's not an answer. Lowered his eyes. You won't get one. Leaned forward, the restraints digging into his wrists. Listen to me. She sent those files. They'll try to bury this, erase it all. If you ever believed a damn thing I said, don't let that happen. Met his eyes for the first time. You think she's still alive? His answer was quiet but absolute. She's smarter than all of us. If anyone can survive being erased, it's her. Weeks passed. No trial, no statements, just silence. was placed under temporary suspension pending investigation, which was another way of saying buried alive. He spent his days in an anonymous office, stripped of clearance, surrounded by walls painted to look calm. He spoke to no one. He was meant to fade. But ghosts never fade completely. Late one night, as he sat alone, a message appeared on his encrypted terminal. No sender, no trace, just a fragment of text. "Look up." He frowned, opened the attached link. It was a news feed, a quiet report buried deep in a European channel, barely covered by global media. A leak. Anonymous documents exposing a rogue intelligence unit operating under false presidential authority. Public. And beneath it, one line of metadata only he would recognize, her encryption pattern, hidden like a heartbeat. She'd done it. He stared at the screen for a long time. The silence around him felt different now, not empty but full. Then slowly he smiled. It wasn't over. Across the ocean, in a small apartment tucked above a bookstore in Lisbon, sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. She wore civilian clothes now. No badge, no clearance, no chain of command. But her laptop still hummed on the table beside her. She read the same article he had, the same leak, the same headlines. The world was waking up, not all at once, not loudly, but enough. She closed the laptop and leaned back, letting the rain fill the silence. Her reflection stared back at her, older maybe, more human. She thought of the man who had once wanted her gone, now the only person who had ever truly seen her. She wondered if he understood what it had cost her. Then again, maybe he did. Because silence was its own kind of battlefield. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the one he'd left on her desk before the raid. The ink had smudged, but the words were still legible. If they call this treason, then let history decide which of us was loyal. Smiled faintly. Loyal, she whispered, to what though? Her gaze drifted to the window, to the blurred horizon of a world that kept spinning, indifferent, alive. Maybe not to nations, she said softly, maybe just to people. The rain fell harder, masking her voice, washing away the weight of the word traitor. She turned off the light. Outside, the city kept breathing. And somewhere deep beneath the noise of power, truth, her truth, was still moving through the circuits of the world, invisible but unstoppable. Because sometimes silence wasn't defeat. Sometimes it was survival. Why did the sea always sound like memory? The wind came off the Atlantic in long, heavy breaths, a rhythm that had no beginning and no end. The cliffs of Portugal were gray under a muted sun, the kind of light that made the world feel half asleep. Stood near the edge, her hair whipping in the wind, eyes fixed on the endless horizon. The world looked different from here, not smaller but quieter. She had learned to live with silence again. It had been 7 months since the leak. 7 months since she had vanished from every roster, every document, every official mention. But the truth had survived. Piece by piece, the world had seen it. The hidden operations, the orders, the ghosts that wore official titles. Governments fell quietly, not in war but in shame. And yet, even as the truth surfaced, the names of those who had uncovered it were never spoken. That was fine, never wanted fame, just peace. But as the wind changed, she heard it, footsteps behind her. Steady, measured, unmistakable. She didn't turn immediately. She just closed her eyes, exhaled, and said softly, "You took your time." A voice behind her, older, roughened by distance but familiar. "Took me a while to find you." She turned then. Stood a few meters away, wearing a civilian jacket over a frame that looked both heavier and lighter. He had lost the insignia but not the presence. His hair was grayer, his eyes sharper, but the lines around them told a new story, not of command, but of conscience. I thought you'd disappear completely, she said. I tried, he said, smiling faintly. Turns out I'm not as good at vanishing as you. You were never good at hiding, she said softly. He laughed low, quiet, genuine. No, I was. The wind moved between them like a bridge. They walked along the cliffside path, the world narrowing into waves and wind and the crunch of gravel beneath their boots. Neither spoke for a while. There was nothing left to explain, only the weight of everything that hadn't been said. Finally broke the silence. They called it a reform initiative, said the leak forced accountability. She smiled without looking at him. That's a polite way to describe a government purge. He shrugged. People needed to see it, even if they'll pretend they didn't. They always do, she said. People don't change because of the truth. They change because of shame. He looked at her, and was it worth it? She stopped walking. The wind pulled her hair across her face. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then quietly, it depends on what you mean by worth. He nodded slowly. You lost everything. She glanced at him. So did you. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Maybe we didn't lose it. Maybe we gave it away. To who? She asked. He looked out over the sea. To whoever still believes it matters. They found a small by the harbor later that afternoon, quiet, tucked between the stone arches of old buildings. The kind of place where no one asked questions. Ordered tea, ordered coffee. They sat by the window, the sea framed behind them like a painting. For a long time neither said a word. The quiet wasn't awkward anymore. It was familiar. You know, said finally, I used to think power came from command, from making people listen. And now, she asked. Now I think power's the opposite, he said. It's what happens when you choose not to speak, when you let truth stand on its own. She tilted her head. That's very poetic for a general. He smiled. Maybe I've been spending too much time thinking instead of shouting. Progress, she said. He chuckled softly. You still watch the networks. Sometimes, she said, just enough to know they're still pretending. He sipped his coffee. They're saying the files came from an anonymous inside the Joint Command. I know. They're trying to erase your name from it all. She looked out the window. Good, it was never about names. He nodded. Still, people should know who did it. She turned back to him, her voice calm but firm. People don't need names, they just need examples. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You always were better at the long game. It's not a game, she said softly. It's survival. The sun dipped lower, the harbor turning gold and gray. Set his cup down. You know what they told me after they cleared me. She raised a brow. That you were lucky. He smiled. That I could come back. They said I could take a quiet advisory post. No command, no press, just fade into the machinery. And I said no. Why? He leaned back, eyes distant. Because the machinery only works if people keep feeding it. She smiled faintly. You sound like me now. Maybe I learned from you. Maybe you always knew. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment there was nothing military in him. No rank, no armor, just a man who'd seen too much and finally understood the cost of it. You ever regret it? He asked quietly. The truth, she asked. He nodded. She thought for a long time before answering. Sometimes, she said, not for what it changed, but for what it revealed. What's that? That most people don't want honesty, they want comfort. He nodded slowly, and we took that from them. No, she said, we gave them a choice. Evening fell. The harbor lights flickered on, reflections dancing over the water. Glanced at his watch, then smiled faintly. It's funny. I used to measure my life in missions, deadlines, deployments. Now I just measure it in moments like this. She tilted her head. And what is this moment then? He paused. The one where I finally stopped running. Her smile was small but genuine. Then don't start again. They sat in silence a while longer. The air between them was easier now, not heavy, not fragile, just real. When they finally stood, the night had grown cool. They walked together along the pier, where the water lapped against the stone in quiet rhythm. The city lights shimmered across the surface like scattered memories. "You'll keep moving, won't you?" asked. She nodded. "It's what I do." "And if they find you?" She looked at him, calm as ever. "Then I'll remind them why they feared me." He laughed softly. "God, you haven't changed." "Neither have you," she said. He stopped walking. "That's not true." She turned back. "No." He shook his head. "I used to believe loyalty meant obedience. And now I think loyalty means defiance." She smiled at that, not out of amusement but recognition. "Then you finally understand," she said quietly. "I think I do." They reached the end of the pier. The sea stretched endlessly before them, black and silver under the rising moon. Turned toward him. "What will you do now?" He looked out across the water. "Maybe I'll disappear for real this time, somewhere quiet, maybe help build something instead of destroy it." She nodded. "You'd be good at that." He looked back at her. "And you?" She smiled faintly. "I'll keep listening." "For what?" "For the next ghost." He chuckled. "Always ghosts." "Always patterns," she corrected. They stood there in silence for a while, two people who had torn down walls and paid for it in solitude. Yet neither looked away. Finally she extended her hand. He took it, no salute, no command, just a handshake, honest, human, final. "Take care of yourself, General," she said. "You too, Oracle." She smiled at the name. "Haven't heard that in a while." He released her hand slowly. "It fits." She stepped back, the wind catching her hair, carrying it like a flag in the dark. Then she turned and walked away down the pier, into the glow of the city beyond. He watched her until she disappeared into the light. The wind rose again, colder now. Turned back toward the sea. The horizon was distant but clear. For the first time in years he didn't feel like he was looking for orders or answers, just peace. He reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded a small piece of paper, the one she had once left for him before the Baltic mission. The ink was faded, but he could still read it. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." He folded it carefully, tucked it away, and whispered into the night. "Yeah, it does." Then he smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need witnesses, and walked into the wind. Because some wars aren't fought with guns. They're fought with conscience, with silence, with the courage to stand still when the world demands you bow. And as the waves broke below, the truth they had carried, fragile, forbidden, enduring, moved on without them. Unseen, unstoppable. Just like them. Moral final reflection. Sometimes, honor isn't in the medals or the orders. It's in the quiet act of saying no when the world demands your silence. Because in the end, dignity doesn't shout. It simply acts.